try this again. Okay, I'm going to try this again. So I've got the GoPro 3 Plus Black and I've got the Sony RX100 Mark III. I opted to go with the Sony RX100 Mark III over going with the GoPro 4. The only two things I thought that were cool about the GoPro 4 was the fact that it could do 2.7K at 50 frames a second, so no jello, good, clean, and high, high resolution that way, and also the time-lapse nighttime shots. The Sony, however, still fits in your pocket. I still have my GoPro 3 for everything else, and the Sony has much better night capabilities for regular video footage, and that's kind of where the GoPro was missing. Also, when I wanted to be able to zoom out on something, yes, I could use software to zoom out, but even on the GoPro 4, you don't have narrow mode in 2.7 or 4K. Therefore, by the time you crop and zoom in the things out, you're really just zooming in on 1080, because, like, for example, well, I won't go into all the details, but basically when you zoom in on something, you lower the resolution, and the resolution of narrow mode at 4K is only 1080 because it doesn't offer a narrow recording mode at 4K. So you can't, like, record it narrow mode on 4K and then zoom in on that with software and actually be zooming in and keeping your resolution at 1080 when you're finished. So I wanted something that had some kind of zoom, optical zoom, and also better night. So that's why I went with the Sony RX100 Mark III. So both cameras are as close as I can configure them to exactly the same. I've got the GoPro at 1080, 24 frames a second, narrow, Pro Tune off. I've got the Sony, of course, is 1080, 24 frames a second, obviously ND filter off, and then it's completely automatic for aperture, ISO, and shutter speed, just like the GoPro is out of the box. I have the max ISO set to 6400 as well, so they're both going to work within the same operating parameters, and so we can compare the noise between the two cameras. So let's take a walk and see what we see. So we got quite a bit more noise there, as you can see, between the two. Now, one thing you have to keep in mind is 1080 narrow. Narrow on the GoPro is not the best for low light on the GoPro. If you go wide on the GoPro, you're going to get more light in on the sensor, and it's going to have less noise. So we will do a pass again with wide mode at the very end, just so you can compare. So this was all in narrow, but again, I wanted to compare the two cameras the same, and as you could see, it appeared there was quite a bit more noise on the GoPro, which would be within reason. It's got a lot smaller sensor and does not have as fast as a lens. So now I'm going to switch the GoPro over to wide mode, and you can compare the noise levels at that. That will be 1080 wide, 24 frames a second is the least amount of noise you're going to get on a GoPro. Okay, so the GoPro's back in wide mode, and you notice you get a lot more light in there now because it is wide, and therefore, because there's more light, there's going to be less noise. So keep that in mind. You could film in wide and crop it down a little. So let's see how these two compare this way. So the GoPro looks pretty darn good when you're filming in wide mode, other than that funky flashing it does. I don't know why it's doing that. It didn't used to do that. I think something's wrong with it. So as you can see, the GoPro actually, once you throw it in wide mode, has a lot less noise, but it is definitely clearer on, there's definitely less noise on the Sony. So now what I'm going to do as well is, now we're getting kind of off the charts here because you don't have something you can compare to. We already know the GoPro definitely looks better in wide than in narrow, but now we're going to take the Sony and I'm going to change the ISO to a higher ISO. And so let's just, first thing I'm going to do is let's just try bumping it up in the minimum settings. See if that has any effect. And now I can also crank the wheel. So what I'm doing now to get more light on the Sony is just increasing the exposure. And that's going to be pretty noisy. I already know it's going to be. I've got it set to 128, or no, 12,008. I don't know. The ISO is something ridiculous. Hold on, let me see. 12,800. The ISO is able to do up to 12,800 if it needs it. I don't have it, you know, it's on auto mode. Let's try forcing that. Let's go. So let's just do this 6400 ISO. So that's 6400. There's 128, or 12,800 I mean. There's 10,000, 8,000, again 64. And like I say, I did crank up the exposure, which we could do that on the GoPro as well. Let's see how bright, let's see, okay. So let's crank up the exposure on the GoPro and the Sony so it really maxes out as saturated with light as it can get. It just forces it. So I'm going to do the same on the GoPro. Hold on. For that, I will have to throw it in Pro Tune mode, but I'll keep everything automatic as far as Pro Tune mode. I'm going to keep everything automatic as far as color, white balance, all that. But I'm going to increase the exposure level. So this is 6400 on the Sony, and as you can see, this is at 0 for the exposure, and the GoPro is still about the same lightness with +2. So in other words, the GoPro just can't get any more light. It can't go to +2 because it's already getting as much light as it possibly can get. So even though you set it at +2, it can't do anything. So the Sony still has room to get brighter. So there's the Sony. And now let's, one last test as we go in here. Let's go ISO. Let's go to 8,000. Take a quick walk around so you can compare the noise. We're going to figure out which mode has the same amount of noise on the Sony as the GoPro does. See, now the GoPro's bright because it has enough light to work with. It can actually turn it up. So they're both at +2. So we're here. Okay, so let's go to 10,000. This is 10,000. As you can see, the GoPro is completely black. Let's throw this back to 6400 for example. 10,000. Let's go to 12,800. So 12,800 is pretty grainy. Doesn't look great, but there you go. So the GoPro, I think 12,800 is actually still, and I'm just curious, let's see what the shutter speed is at this mode. Let me go back out. It's still recording at 1/50th. So I could literally go brighter than this and drop my ISO. I don't know why it's recording at 1/50th. So I'm gonna stop all this. I'm gonna come back with just the Hold on, let me just try it. So I'm going to change the hold on. So I'm going to go into manual mode here. I can pick the mode. I'm going to go manual. And so we've got 12800. That. Let's throw this all the way down. Ooh, wow. Holy cow. That's going to be blurry. Okay. So here are the so yeah, I'm going to start recording now with the Sony again. This is going to be really not smooth. I'm just experimenting. So here we got the Sony. I've got it at 1/4 of a second. Everything's cranked up as much as I can get it. I got it at 1/4 of a second. That's so much light I can't deal with it, and it's not usable anyway. It's too slow, but I just wanted to see. So now let's go crank this up. And interesting thing is you can change this. It appears you can change these settings while you're recording. So there's basically 1/15 of a second. So that's equivalent to 15 frames a second. Not really usable, but you know, gives you an idea. It's good focused in. It's a lot of light. So now let's change it to 1/25 of a second. So there you go. That is now what the GoPro. That's it's pretty impressive. There you go, folks. Yes, there's still noise, but that's really we've went in manual mode now, and we've totally forced it to use 1/25 of a second, and we forced it to use the and I'm guessing the Sony probably tries to keep it around 1/50 of a second to make it not blurry, but yeah, you get the idea. Here, the same room. Yeah, so that's like huge. So let's see. Now we'll play a little more with the Sony. Oh, that's so bright, it's ridiculous. Because we're obviously in full manual mode, which kind of sucks right now. Actually, you know what we could do, if it's forcing the shutter speed because it's trying to keep it from being blurry, it might be beneficial to go just in aperture shutter speed priority mode, and then you could force it to 1/25, and I'm sure it's going to keep the aperture. I wonder what it would do. Well, let's just for kicks, so let's find out which has the let's try the ISO now. Now let's see what ISO cleans up a bit. So there's 1280. There's 10,000. 10,000 don't look bad, but it's still got noise. 8,000. 6,400. There's 6,400. There's 8,000. There's 10,000. So let's just walk around here. Yeah, it's pretty noisy. So let's cut it down to 6,400. So there you go. 24 frames a second. 25 frames a second. 24 frames a second, but it's 1/25 of a second shutter speed. So now let's see if we could automate that so that it doesn't go crappy. So it looks like 64 is probably where you might be able to do. Honestly, I don't know. Until I go to edit this in the machine, I won't know. But let's try 8. Let's try 8,000. So let's say 8,000. So let's try 8,000, and now let's switch the camera into let's change it to priority mode, shutter priority mode. So I'm going to do that. So we're going to go to shutter priority mode so I can force it into 1/25th of a second. I'm going to keep the exposure up as high so it forces it. I'm going to do the ISO. I'm going to switch that back to automatic, but I'm going to make it automatic with a range of with the range up to 8,000. So auto and up to 8. It doesn't give you that. It only gives you auto up to 6,400. It doesn't give you auto up to 8,000. That kind of sucks. Now let's keep it auto up to 6,400 then. Let's just see how it does. Auto up to 6,400, and in theory, now what it's going to do is it's going to use the ISO. It's going to keep the aperture all the way open right now, and it's going to keep the okay, so now it's going to keep the aperture open right now, and it's going to use the ISO when it's bright. It's going to crank the ISO down to accommodate for light. We're on 1/25th, so it's actually keeping the aperture right open. So that seems like the mode you'd want to do right there. So this is with see, the GoPro just was not that bright. See, the GoPro is really funky on its lighting. Come back in here, look how bright it is again. But it's got more noise. So yeah, the GoPro, as you can see, is actually very temperamental on its lighting. But there you go, look at that. So we've got 1/25th of a second forced. We've got the aperture of 1.8. We've got the brightness turned all the way up, exposure set to +2, ISO auto between 125 and 6,400. So that's the same range of ISO as the GoPro. Yeah, I think that makes me happy. That really makes me happy. So we just had to find the right modes. So there you go. This is really, look how clean that is. Like I say, you could go brighter. Let's do one last thing. Let's change auto mode to 2.8, 12.8. There you go. So there we go. Now it's at 12,800 for the ISO. It still looks like it's got less noise than the GoPro. So let's go back in here and just see. Alright, well, I was a little worried. I was kind of feeling a little annoyed. I'm really annoyed with the whole battery situation, to be honest. There's no reason you shouldn't just be able to plug a USB battery in the back of this thing and have it run while you're using it on a USB battery. The funny thing is, it actually gives you an error message saying this battery is not big enough to power, so it suggests that you should be able to use a bigger battery. In fact, I've seen posts where people said they used a different power source and they were actually able to power the camera through the USB port and use it at the same time. However, I've not been able to get that to work. Again, that's kind of a big deal. I really thought that would work. I didn't realize it wouldn't, based on some of the posts I had read, and it wouldn't make sense not to make it work. Even the GoPro can do it. But I'm definitely pleased with its size. I'm definitely pleased with its lens and sensor capabilities as far as night footage. So like any camera, I hated the GoPro when I first got out of the box. I said, I'm going to take it back. That's exactly how I felt about this camera too. The Sony was like, I don't know if I'm keeping this. But actually, after doing a test and comparing the two, which I apologize for it being a long video, but I just wanted to be thorough, and I'm sure other people out there might be trying to do the same thing to make a decision of where they want to go next from the GoPro. I hope you find this useful. Good night.